Hi everyone, welcome to episode 38 of the Startup Playbook podcast. My name is Rohit Bhargava, and each week I interview successful founders, investors, and subject matter experts on how they got started, the strategies they used to succeed, and their advice to current and future entrepreneurs. Just a couple of announcements from me before we get into this episode. So first of all, a quick reminder about the live podcast event we're hosting at Team Square on Thursday, 2nd of March, where I will be interviewing Nick Crocker. Nick has previously exited 2 of his startups, selling We Are Hunted to Twitter in 2012 before selling his second startup, Sessions, to MyFitnessPal in 2014. Nick is now back in Australia and is the Melbourne partner at Blackbird Ventures, a $230 million venture capital firm based out of Sydney. At the event, Nick will share his experiences in starting, growing and selling businesses and discussing what investors like Blackbird look for in startups. So if you want to meet Nick and get a behind-the-scenes look at the Startup Playbook podcast in action, you can purchase a ticket to the event at bit.do/playbooknickcrocker. I'll include the link in the show notes for you as well. And secondly, Startup Playbook is expanding. Later this week, I'm launching a new project called Startup Playbook TV, which will be hosted on another platform. I'll be announcing the launch and links for the new project on my personal Twitter account. So if you want to check out the launch, follow me on Twitter. My handle is @RohitBhargava7. So, coming back to episode 38, my guest for today's episode is Simon Holland. Simon is the founder and director of Papercloud, a digital product development studio that works with founders to bring products to market and scale growth through its Papercloud services and Papercloud Ventures model. In the interview, we talk about how to turn an idea into a business, how to hire the right co-founders or team, getting the right feedback, and how to win in a competitive market. Without further ado, here is my interview with Simon Holland. Hi Simon, welcome to the Startup Playbook podcast, and thanks so much for taking the time to be here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So for those people that may not be familiar with you or Papercloud, can you share a little bit of your story and what got you here today?
Yeah, so 6 years ago, Thomas Spacek and I basically, in the basement of a building, started Papercloud. I actually dropped out of uni. I was at RMIT in my final semester and basically decided that I didn't really want to be at university. I prefer to actually be doing business. So we basically partnered up. He had a very technical background and I was obviously non-technical, but at the same time loved technology. Obviously, thought that there was incredible, opportunity with, iPhone coming out back then. And it's just amazing to see how it's grown. So since then, basically, it's been about almost 6 years since we started the company. And basically, that's kind of...
Sure. So, I mean, in terms of, I'm sure there are a couple of listeners who are at that same stage that you were at the very start of your journey, who are, either at university at the moment and realize that it's not really for them, or have just graduated and realize that the corporate space isn't really for them and are looking to move into the startup space. What did that process look like for you of, we have an idea for a business or, of something that we want to create. What did that look like into making that something real and getting your first few clients on board?
Yeah, well, I guess it was, really the opportunity, the time, the fact that, I found a fantastic business partner and really just felt like the right time. So it kind of was like I was influencing it, but also obviously the fact that, it was the right time to do it. And I guess, timing is obviously a big thing, but at the same time, I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I didn't originally want to be at university, but then got some advice and, was recommended that it's a really good foundation to have, so going to university was incredible. Understanding, the foundations of business, accounting, finance, commercial law, all those things that very much help, help basically, get us to the point we are today. So to any kind of, person that's looking at, whether they should go to university or whether they shouldn't go to university, or if they're at university and they want to go and work at a corporate versus a startup, I guess the best bit of advice I have for them is at least try each. So go to university, work in a corporate. Before going to university, I actually worked at PwC. And to be honest, working at PwC was fantastic because it gave me an opportunity to understand how a large corporate works, which then really helped with Papercloud when we did work with corporates because I understood how it actually works. So I think getting experience in all different areas and going to university, it makes sense. But I guess I felt as though I got enough out of the university and the kind of final semester didn't really seem as though I was learning much that I really cared about, and I guess it was all about starting a business and just going hard. And I guess I decided, screw it, may as well just go hard and drop out of university and start the business.
Sure. And so you sort of touched on, Thomas was the right sort of co-founder for you as well. And I know that that's an issue that a lot of early stage startup founders face of, either they're non-technical and they're looking for a technical co-founder, or just for them to manage everything, they need other people on. What do you sort of recommend for people that are at that stage who are looking for the right person to join their business? What's the best way for them to go about doing that, of finding the right person and then bringing them onto the business?
Well, I guess, if somebody waits around to find the right person, it's very hard. And, sometimes it can be, especially with entrepreneurs, it's very hard to find, especially technical co-founders to come on board. I think it's easier for technical co-founders to find kind of more, the kind of business side. So I guess, with that, it comes down to, I guess, even if you don't have a technical co-founder, it's still very much possible to create a startup, to work on a startup, and I guess talking even non-technical startups, it's always good, I guess, if you understand an industry really, really well, then you can identify, where the needs are, the pain points in the industry. So it's about really going and hustling hard and actually going out and creating a product or creating a startup. And then basically, once you get it to a certain point, that's the point where it'll become much easier to find co-founders. So waiting around is probably not a good thing. It's probably good to just go, and then put yourself in a position where you'll be attractive to co-founders.
So I know one of the most common issues that I've seen, especially when people are looking for technical co-founders, is great, you can do some development work. You've said yes, awesome. Let's get you onto the team. Yeah. So one of the major things that I've kind of seen is a lot of startup founders go after the wrong person that doesn't share the same vision of the product. They have a very big difference in terms of the way that they operate and they what they're trying to create. And obviously outsourcing is an option that's kind of come. There are a lot of great sort of software development firms that are out there. I just wanted to know what your view was of bringing on a co-founder versus potentially outsourcing the early stage development of your product to a company.
Outsourcing the early stage makes a lot of sense, and outsourcing it to whether it be to freelancers or to even to potential I guess CTOs or co-founders makes a lot of sense, because I guess it gives you an opportunity to kind of, I guess, obviously get that product out there, but at the same time it gives you an opportunity to be able to work with an agency, and there's a lot of digital agencies now that actually do take equity and kind of co-found startups. And also, if you are looking at bringing on a technical co-founder, it's very important that you work with each other, potentially launch the product, pay them to do that, and then basically once you've launched the product, then go into partnership, because it's really giving you an opportunity to work together. I think a big mistake a lot of startups make is they partner too early, things don't work out, and that could be detrimental to the business.
So on that, what are some of the things that people should look for, whether that's outsourcing, whether that's bringing on a technical co-founder? What are some of the characteristics that they should look for in the right team or the right person?
Well, I think obviously team dynamics. I think it's really important that, whether it be, a technical co-founder, or whether it be, a company that they outsource it to, shares the vision, and also brings a lot of value to the vision, I think that if, you as a non-technical person work in an industry and have identified a huge need in the industry, and then basically you go and you take that to, whether it be a technical development company or a co-founder, it's obviously really, really important that they also bring a lot of value and they question your ideas. And if they're just saying, yes, that sounds amazing, let's just do it, be a bit wary, because obviously they've got background, they can provide value. So unless they're providing value up front, even throughout the initial conversation you have with them, then be wary, because obviously it's very easy for them to say yes, especially if you're putting money on the table, but it's obviously very important to identify value through them actually questioning the idea and really thinking about it and refining it. So be wary of that, I guess.
So once you've got a team, and I'm sure sort of Papercloud gets pitched a lot of different ideas, every week, every year. How do you sort of decide which projects that you kind of want to work on, or what are some of the key sort of things that you look for when deciding to work on a project?
Well, really, I guess, most of the actual projects we work on are B2B, typically for startups at least. A lot of, I guess, the kind of stuff we do for corporates is a bit more, B2C. But what we look for is somebody that really understands the industry. So if somebody comes to us, for example, if they have an industry background in a certain area and they've identified a really strong pain point in that industry, then that typically means they've got a good idea. I guess it's really important that they've actually done a bit of research before coming to us. We find so much of the time people come to us with an idea of an industry they don't know anything about, and they haven't even looked at any competition, they haven't looked at the landscape. So I guess what we look for is obviously people that have done their research, people that do understand the industry back to front, and really know that they're solving a genuine pain point in the industry. And also, to be honest, when people come and they say, oh, this industry is, really antiquated and I want to build this huge bit of technology that, fixes all these problems, that's actually a negative thing. I think it's really important that with a startup especially is to identify a very small pain point in the industry that can be solved with a really nice solution, and I guess taking it from there.
In terms of the solution, so assuming you've got an idea to solve a problem for a need that exists, what does that process look like of taking that concept and then sort of building that out into a product or getting that into the hands of customers?
So what we always do, I guess, is the first thing is we take the idea and then we really refine it and basically first of all work out the business model around it. So a lot of startups go out there without really a strong business model, and even though it may be very attractive to consumers and a product that people love to use, there's a lot of startups that we've seen actually take a fantastic product to market with no strong business model early on. So it's really about taking the idea and then pairing that with a really strong business model. We have a huge amount of entrepreneurs that come to us and they have ideas, and then I always question what's the business model, and they don't really have a strong answer for that, which is always a bit scary. But having said that though as well, that's what we do at Papercloud is early on, even during the first 10 minutes of the very first discussion, we kind of ask those questions and even on the spot, try to help them actually identify a strong business model if there is one. I mean, sometimes it just isn't, sometimes it's hard to get, businesses and consumers to pay for something, unless it's really solving something, a genuine need. Another thing as well is we find that a lot of entrepreneurs come up with ideas where it's actually augmenting the work of individuals. So it's obviously consumers' time is very precious, and also I guess businesses' time is very precious. So sometimes they're not exactly wary of the end user and the fact that even though the product may add value, it's actually augmenting their workload because they've got a different product to use, as opposed to basically fixing a problem which kind of currently requires a huge amount of time and effort, and that they're the best products that basically reduce workload essentially, not augment it.
So again, in terms of all of the different ideas that you've sort of come across and worked with as well, what are some of the common trends that you've seen in terms of products or startups that have succeeded and products that haven't done as well as expected?
Yeah, I guess to be honest, the ones that maybe didn't do enough research, didn't talk to enough customers. I mean, like you said before, the process that we go through is basically we go and we help them refine the business model. But to be honest, it's very rare, very, very, very rare that we actually say, oh yeah, good, let's potentially get started. Typically we say, look, go and talk to all the different potential users, talk to as many businesses as possible, as many users as possible, and get genuine feedback from them. And don't get it from people that get it from people that you don't know. Knock on doors, sit down, and a lot of the time when you actually approach a business and say, I want to get feedback on something, that then opens up a relationship with them. And what it means is then you can hit them back in the future if you want to then sell them the product that you have. But really, I guess, a big failing is basically, entrepreneurs making too many assumptions around what the market needs without validating those before doing anything. So don't spend any money on development until you've really gone out and spoken and really got genuine feedback from, potential users and potential paying customers.
On the feedback, so again, one of the things that I kind of see with a lot of startups is they'll send out surveys, or they will lead with very leading questions of, if we were to save you money, would you download our app? Which everyone's going to say yes to that. What's the right process or what's the right methodology of getting feedback that's actually relevant to knowing whether there's legs in the business?
Well, it's a bit easier doing it with B2B startups. So with B2B startups, what we recommend is basically going out and actually having a set of questions and basically understanding, more so than actually getting feedback on an idea, is really understanding how businesses do certain things. So if your idea is in a certain industry, go to those industry stakeholders, and as opposed to telling them the idea early on, I mean, it's always good to share ideas all the time, but really asking questions and understand, what problems they have in their industry and whether, the problems they have are actually genuine problems, or whether they're kind of like a bit iffy kind of problems that, they don't really care too much about. So going and getting that feedback face-to-face is really fantastic because you're building a relationship. Obviously with consumer startups, it's very different. Surveys are very tough, and with consumer startups, I mean, it's obviously good to get feedback, but at the same time, I guess it's one of those ones where I guess an MVP, a very basic MVP, is really ultimately going to tell you whether people are going to use it or not, because what people say in surveys is typically they think they may want something, they might use it once and never use it ever again. So especially with B2B startups, it's really good to just sit down and have a coffee. And people are really receptive to being like, hey, I'm working on a startup idea. Do you have, 15 minutes to have a sit down coffee? And they're receptive to that. If you say to them, oh, I've got this startup, and I want to pitch it to you, then they might put up their gates because they're concerned that you're trying to sell them something. So that's always a good way. And then you get their feedback, and then in a couple of months' time, you come back to them with your product and say, hey, look, thanks so much for the feedback. Here's the product that solves the problems, which makes then the sell much easier to businesses.
So in terms of feedback, what's kind of often overlooked is when it comes to sort of lean startup methodology, it's less so about here's a solution, can we find the user, but more about co-creating with potential customers and really sort of figuring out their pain points. Often, again, what I've seen is people go in with an assumption of a pain point. If you're open in terms of getting the feedback from customers, they'll tell you, if that's not right, they'll tell you what their bigger pain point is that you should be focusing on.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so in terms of, we've kind of talked about some of the negative commonalities that you've seen, but what are, for companies like Vivi and HotDoc that have done really well, what are some of the things that made them so successful?
Well, I guess with HotDoc's a really interesting one because I guess that was one of the first startups we ever actually worked on, and I guess with HotDoc, it was actually a very competitive landscape, to be honest, and I guess we were very inexperienced early on when it came to building HotDoc and I guess building that business. It was an ultra competitive market, and one of our competitors had raised a huge amount of money, literally the day we were about to launch the product. So it was insane timing. But I guess with HotDoc, it was really just about really being focused on our strategy and not veering from that. It was about understanding what our competitors' strategies were and really making sure that our strategy, not following them, but leading. That makes sense. So we went for very much a patient, with HotDoc, which is basically a patient engagement platform for GPs and patients. We very much went with pre-existing patients, so really focusing on providing clinics the tools so they can engage their pre-existing patients, whereas our competitors were very much going after kind of the model where I guess more like the kind of lastminute.com or more the directory model, where it was basically about being a directory for doctors. And I think really our strategy really resonated with doctors because they care about building relationships with patients and not just basically commoditizing their services, if that makes sense. And I guess really just making sure that we're working on a really strong product, that we're really, I guess, testing the product, really making sure it's refined. And I guess, really being able to build solutions for, I guess, clinics and large corporates, large corporate clinic groups, which basically really solve their problems, as opposed to telling them what their problems were, really solving their problems. So that was a struggle, but it was one of those ones where we just went hard. We constantly reassessed our strategy and basically made sure that, it was constantly, I guess we were leading, we weren't following, and just a lot of really hard work. So that was a really good example of maybe early on it was. Now, if I would have looked at HotDoc, I probably would have been like, well, probably not the best business opportunity because of, now with so much more experience, I would have taken it through all the filters. But obviously through hard hustle and working really, really hard and really listening, we managed to get the product to where it is today. Vivi, as an example, very, very different. Vivi all came from a genuine need in the education market for wireless presentation mirroring in classrooms. So basically, an entrepreneur who worked in that industry approached us with the idea, and basically was like, "There's nothing that really addresses this, really, really well." So the fantastic thing about that product is that it's genuinely solving a problem in the industry. It's following an industry trend. It's not really a hugely competitive market. Yes, we do have a few competitors, but I wouldn't say any direct competitors that are purely focusing on education. So we've managed to really put our foot down and really go hard there. And I mean, a couple of weeks ago, we basically just launched in the UK. Which is really fantastic, and we're in a huge amount of classrooms now in Australia, and the demand's insane basically, so yeah. It's really, really exciting.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's good.
So just going back a little bit to HotDoc and sort of entering a really competitive landscape. So a little plug for Startup Playbook TV. In one of the early episodes, I spoke to a startup who's in the food space who was talking about, who had questions about how do I enter a competitive a competitive industry where there's a lot of bigger players with a lot more funding than we do. If you were to start HotDoc again, or enter another sort of industry with a very sort of competitive, within a competitive landscape, what are some of the things that you would do to make that business successful?
I guess really, sometimes it's actually better to enter a market, a really saturated market, which has got lots of really good technology startups, probably isn't the best one to enter, but it's never best to be first, to be honest. So I guess it is good sometimes to actually let a few competitors go out, and even larger players go out there and make a few mistakes along the way, and very much observe their mistakes. So going into an industry where there's a bit of competition and there's some big players, it's really making sure that you understand their product back to front and really try to understand what their short-term and long-term strategies are, and then make sure that you're being much smarter than them. Really, competition is a big game. It's very competitive. Starting businesses, startups, it's a big competition. Everybody's kind of out there to basically be the number one. So it's very similar to a kind of, a strategic game. It's like a game of chess, So entering a market where you have, lots of competition, it's about being clever, and it's basically, whether it be, undercutting them in price isn't necessarily, the best thing to do. I guess it's really about identifying, what they're doing, and maybe what they're not doing well, and then really just focus on that. But I'm a big believer that, if the industry does have competition, there is opportunity. But I guess it's really about, especially bigger players seem to, try to focus on big products that solve lots of problems, which sometimes can be to their detriment. So maybe going out there and solving small problems. And also, you take, accounting software. Xero is a fantastic example of what Xero has done. Is basically they've kind of captured the small business market. Genius. They've just gone really hard at the small business market, owned the small business market, which is great. So maybe understanding, if there's a competitive landscape, also understanding which market to go after. And sometimes going after a smaller market is actually a good thing, because then you can monopolize a smaller market, as Peter Thiel says.
Yeah, I think one of the things that really stood out to me when you were talking about HotDoc earlier was really understanding what it is that doctors were looking for, and really focusing on that, on the building sort of relationships, and using that as a point of difference of what you were doing compared to some of the bigger players was really interesting. I think when it comes to, as you sort of touched on, a lot of it is, what's your point of difference? How do you stand out from everything else that's kind of happening? And how are you better, whether that's within a particular niche or with a particular feature, or with your specific customer segment, to make sure that you stand a chance, even with people that are bigger. So I guess looking at HotDoc and Vivi as well, what has the process been like? So HotDoc's recently raised $2.2 million from
Airtree. That was actually a little while ago. I think that's about a year and a half ago, probably a bit more. I don't know exactly, but yeah, that was a little while ago.
Sure. So what was the process like? Because Stage Label started at the Papercloud office, and I remember kind of meeting the HotDoc team at the very relatively early stage, 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
What was that process like of kind of building out that initial product and getting those initial customers on to the company the size it is now? And what are some of the challenges and things that you've seen in terms of scaling the company?
I guess as far as the challenges is constantly being under threat of the competition. I guess that's obviously a huge challenge. I guess building a technical product and building the team really. I guess with a startup, as you scale, you start kind of building departments. So HotDoc's now got quite a few employees, and it means that we've had to go through the process of kind of starting out with an individual taking care of one, whether it be the sales, for example, another person taking care of customer support and customer success, another person, taking care of, the technical development, through to actually then building a team and building those departments. And I think it's really about, one of the big challenges is actually building that team, and making sure that it kind of doesn't grow too quickly, and that you make sure that you kind of maintain a nimble, entrepreneurial kind of, feel to the company, and where, as you grow, things slow down a lot. And I think one of the challenges that all the startups face, especially when they raise capital, they've suddenly all this cash in the bank, they go out and start hiring lots of people, but then maybe they don't necessarily filter those people enough, and also it slows down how quickly the company can move, if that makes sense, because it has to go through, a bit more of a kind of arduous process. So I guess one of the big challenges is, making sure that you maintain that nimble startup approach when growing. I guess other things as well are looking at growth. A lot of the time with startups, what they face is it's very hard early on to get customers. B2B startups, I guess it's really about making sure that the sales funnel is constantly refined. So it's about very regularly sitting back and looking at the processes in the business, especially when it comes to the sales, and identifying, okay, are we doing this actually well? How can we improve it? And constantly improving it. I guess with our B2B businesses, it's all about understanding the funnel, understanding how to get customers in, how to convert those customers. So you've got one thing which I guess is, the inbound side of the business, where you're trying to get as many leads as possible and then actually closing those leads as well at the same time. So I guess a lot of startups kind of face that challenge of, being able to convert and how they can keep refining that. So I guess a good bit of advice there is to make sure that, you're observing other startups and what they're doing. And I guess, you're really understanding, the reasons why why businesses aren't actually, saying yes and actually moving forward with the product, and really identifying that. And to be honest with you, that's probably one of the biggest challenges startups face, especially in the B2B space, is getting those conversions and converting those leads.
On the sales funnel side of it, and startups sort of, especially in the early stages, struggling to convert, is that more of an issue of top of funnel, getting enough people to come in and gain exposure, or is it more the actual sort of conversion side of, we've got people that are interested, how do we actually close?
Well, yeah, obviously getting, the leads in is one thing, but sometimes, you can go through fluctuations where at certain times you might have too many leads coming in. And then if you're getting a lot of inbound leads, they expect a response very quickly. So it's about kind of, automating those systems is really, really important. So at the top of the funnel, it's making sure it's very automated and people feel as though they're getting a very personal experience when they go through the sales funnel. But I guess at the same time, it's really important to make sure that when it comes to actually then going through the process of actually getting them on as a customer and a paying customer, that you can actually service that customer and you can actually get them up and running really, really quickly. Because it's one thing, I guess, getting across the line, but the other thing is actually getting them using the product as quickly as possible. The last thing you want is to have a big, you made all these sales and it's all great, but then you kind of get customers that are starting to get a bit pissed off because they're waiting to, be set up and all those kind of things. So I guess what's really important is basically automating that whole sales process as much as possible, because really through automation is the most responsive way of basically getting things up and running for customers. So I guess really focusing on that.
And I wanted to briefly talk about Papercloud Ventures and some of the things that you're doing there as well. Yeah. Can you share a little bit about the model and how you sort of assist startups?
So I guess we have Papercloud Services, which is basically the company that people know about publicly. It's basically a software design development company where we work with startups and we also work with corporates on basically standalone products. So people come to us with an idea, we help them refine that idea, then we have a fantastic design team that basically goes through and actually designs the product, and then we have a fantastic development team that basically then builds that product and then getting to market. So Papercloud Services very much takes the idea and basically gets the product to market. We've got all the resources in-house that you really need to do that. And with Papercloud Ventures, basically, originally Papercloud Ventures, we partnered with entrepreneurs early on and basically kind of work out an arrangement with them, and then basically an equity arrangement, and then what we do is we go and take the product to market. But what we've identified now is it's much better to actually to work with actual entrepreneurs and get to know them and work out whether it's a good business opportunity before actually doing a kind of formal partnership. So now Papercloud Ventures, what we do is basically with certain startups that we work with through Papercloud Services, we actually then go through to when around launch time, we actually then partner with them. And we basically get them to the point, which is the really tough point, I guess, is building the product's the easy part, because you're making a lot of assumptions, it's a lot of fun. But then really the first kind of 6 months to a year is the really, really tough part, because that's when you're trying to find the product market fit. So really in a nutshell, what Papercloud Ventures provides is basically helping entrepreneurs find that product market fit. So really using our commercial experience, our networks, to really help them identify that and move the business in certain ways so they can actually identify that product market fit. We've done it now a lot of times. Papercloud Services and that work with over 50 startups, so we're really well versed in what it takes to actually get that product market fit. Also scaling and actually building a team, so we actually help with that, so especially with the technical side of things, really making sure that we can attract talent for that startup. A lot of startups find it hard to hire technical teams if they're completely non-technical, so we kind of add that technical element to the business to help them hire. Obviously we help with the filtering and making sure they're hiring the right people, and the other one is basically capital raising. So we have really strong relationships with a lot of the large VCs and a lot of angel investors, and what we do is we really help them essentially raise that next round of capital, because typically the as you very well know, the capital raising cycle is pre-seed around the idea, and then basically around when you launch the product, or just after you launch the product, and you've identified a little bit of product market fit, then the seed round, and then basically from seed, the next one's Series A. And between seed and Series A is where Papercloud Ventures really offers the value of how to get that product, how to refine that product, how to build a bit of a team, and really get to the point where VCs in Australia are very keen to invest in companies. So we understand what VCs are after. We understand at what point in the business they need to get to. So we basically help the ventures get to that point there. Papercloud Ventures, we don't publicly, if you Google us, you won't find anything about us, and we do that for a reason, because we're very discerning with the ventures and we give them a lot of love. So we realistically only do about 3 new ventures a year.
So based on you only sort of taking on 3 new ventures a year, what is it specifically that you're looking for startups that are at that stage?
Well, we're looking for, I guess, really great founders. Founders that are really switched on and understand the industry. Preferably we work with entrepreneurs that have actually gone and built businesses in more traditional businesses, and that's now we actually found that the 3 main new startups we're working with are actually working with entrepreneurs that have actually gone and built really successful businesses. So we look for people that have had success in more traditional spaces and that we know will be able to run a business really well. Obviously the opportunity, really fantastic, and I guess really the dynamics between Papercloud and the entrepreneurs, if that really works very well. So we kind of look for those 3 things.
So Simon, for anyone that wants to get in touch, find out more about Papercloud or Papercloud Ventures, what's the best way for them to do that?
They're more than welcome to email or call me. So yeah, just I guess email or call, and I'm usually pretty responsive, and I really love catching up with everybody, because who knows if there's an opportunity or not, and I think every conversation leads to something else.
Fantastic. I'll make sure those links are in the show notes. Simon, once again, thanks so much for sharing your time and insights today. It's been fantastic.
No problem. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to episode 38 of the Startup Playbook podcast. You can find the show notes of my interview with Simon, along with a curated list of tools and resources for startup founders at startupplaybook.co. As always, you can join the conversation through our Twitter account. The handle is @PlaybookStartup. Next week, I will be publishing my interview with Nick Crocker. If you can't wait till then, come along to the live session this Thursday evening at Team Square. Also a reminder about the launch of Startup Playbook TV. Follow me on Twitter at Rohit Bhargava7 to hear the latest announcements. I hope to see you at the live session on the 2nd of March. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date with our latest episodes. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you at episode 39 next week.